Minister, the issue that I want to raise with you today is some similarity to the last one in terms of it relates to Garda actions and particularly juveniles in antisocial behaviour cases. Now, antisocial behaviour is an umbrella term that covers a lot of different activity, and there are some who will say that antisocial behaviour is just that, it's antisocial, but of course it encompasses criminality as well. And I fear at the moment we have a situation where there are certain young people out there who are behaving antisocially, but by extension criminally, with impunity. They are not being held to account for what they are doing, for the impact they're having on local communities, on specific residents, and in terms of the criminal actions that they're taking. Now, Ministry, you know that I have been practising in criminal law for nearly 20 years. I have dealt with juvenile cases. I will be the last one to suggest that we should increase the criminalisation of young people. I think it is unhelpful in many, many ways, and I will allude briefly to the dysfunctionality of our current children's court system and the delays in implementing all the progressive measures that were put into the Children Act 25 years ago. But on the flip side of that coin, you cannot have a situation where young people, teenagers, are out there doing whatever they want to whomever they want without any fear of consequence. That leads to a situation of huge lawlessness in communities. It massively interrupts the ability of ordinary people living in that community to enjoy their property, to get on with their lives, go to work, bring their kids to school, send their kids to the shop even. And I've met people in the Dundee area who tell me they will not let their 12-year-old child go to the shop on their own because of kids in the area who might intimidate them or intercept them or even rob them. Now, we cannot have a situation where that is allowed to continue. I have raised this with the Gardaí. We are lucky in Dún Laoghaire and in the F&W districts in South Dublin and Dún Laoghaire and Blackrock to have Gardaí who are on top of their brief, who are working incredibly hard, who liaise with the communities and are plugged into the situation. But I know that they have the problem that they don't feel they're equipped with either the resources or perhaps more importantly the powers to deal with this issue. So for example, if you have a 14-year-old who engages in criminal activity in the local area, maybe at a low level, he or she gets arrested by the Gardaí and brought down to Blackrock or Dún Laoghaire Garda station, and they cannot be left in a cell on their own, first of all. When they are there, they cannot be with one adult on their own. There has to be two Gardaí with them. That then takes two Gardaí off the streets. They can't be out doing the work that we need them to do at a particular time. And in due course, a parent is called. And I will acknowledge that many of these problems often stem from lack of parental control, but a parent or guardian is called, he or she comes down to the station and the child is released into that person's custody. They're brought home, they're not even kept in the house for the rest of the night sometimes, and no prosecution may flow from that. Now, whatever about there being no prosecution, the reality is there is a deficit at the moment in what Gardaí can do to deal specifically with juvenile misbehaviour, specifically with juvenile antisocial behaviour and specifically with juvenile criminality. Obviously, the further up the scale of seriousness it goes, the greater the power for the Gardaí to act. But at the moment, people tell me in the Dún Laoghaire constituency, which is a lovely place to live and in which we don't generally suffer from major crime problems, but we do have a growing juvenile antisocial behavioural problem. It is a problem that exists in parks, in housing estates, on main streets. In Dean's Grange recently, the windows of many shops were broken overnight. Now, that was one particular offender who I understand has been apprehended by the Gardaí. I don't know the details of that, and I'm sure that will take its course within the courts. So further up the scale, fine, there may be the power for the Gardaí to act. But in terms of the stuff that puts in on ordinary people, prevents them from the peaceful enjoyment of their property and their neighbourhood, to go to work and to school and the shop, there's a major problem. And Minister, I would love to hear your proposals for how we're going to deal with that.
For raising this very important issue. Obviously, there's a complexity to how society should respond to criminality by people under 18 years of age. But my starting point is looking at the impact it has upon victims. And from the victim's point of view, as Deputy Ward has described, it is cold comfort, really, that the person who is perpetrating the criminal act or the antisocial behaviour is, in fact, under 18 years of age. The impact that the offence or the antisocial behaviour has on the individual is as significant if it was being carried out by an adult as opposed to being carried out by a child. So I'm conscious, and that's where I start, Deputy, as I'm sure you do in the first instance, you look to see what's the impact on the victim. When it is the case that the criminality or antisocial behaviour is being carried out by a person under 18 years of age, you'll be aware from your experience that obviously we have a different statutory procedure in terms of dealing with people who are defined as children under the Children Act. And since the enactment of the Children Act some quarter of a century ago now, Ireland's approach has been to divert children from the criminal justice system, with detention being, as it says in the Act, Deputy, as you'll be aware, an option of last resort. Now, that doesn't mean, however, that detention isn't sometimes necessary. Regrettably, sometimes it is necessary for there to be detention of children, and that's why I'm pleased to say that when it comes to Oberstown, that we've been able, through consultation with Minister Foley, to increase the number of spaces available for boys in Oberstown, and that was done as a result of consultation I had with Minister Foley. An essential pillar, I suppose, of the child-focused approach is the Garda Youth Diversion Programme, and that is effective. It provides the statutory basis for the Garda Youth Diversion Programme. The intention of this programme is to divert children aged 12 to 17 years of age who have been engaged in such behaviour away from the criminal justice system and towards more positive pro-social behaviour and life choices. Children who commit criminal offences are considered for admission to the diversion programme. Each such case is assessed, and the director of the Garda Diversion Programme, the Garda Superintendent, decides if the case is suitable or not for inclusion in the programme. I have to say I had the pleasure recently of being out in Dunleary Garda Station. Your colleague, Deputy Devlin, invited me out there. I met the officials and superintendent there, and I must say I was extremely impressed by their commitment to policing the area. And obviously the challenges they face when it comes to dealing with juvenile offenders is consistent with the problems that exist around the country. Young people deemed suitable by the director of the Garda Youth Diversion Programme may be referred to the local youth diversion projects, where in collaboration with a Garda Juvenile Liaison Officer, these projects provide support to children to address their behaviour and engage in positive engagement with the communities. There is success, Deputy. I know sometimes people say youth diversion programmes, they're not effective, they're not successful. There is success in respect of them. And if you look at the statistics in terms of the number of people being referred to youth diversion programmes, we can see that notwithstanding the year-on-year population growth, the number of children coming to the attention of the diversion programme has generally decreased. So I appreciate, Deputy, that mightn't be of much comfort to the victim who's suffering from the criminality or antisocial behaviour of a person under 18 years of age, but there does need to be a Garda response. And if there isn't an adequate, or if the individual child doesn't want to go along with the youth diversion programme, well then the force of the criminal justice system must operate as it can in respect to children. But if we want to put in a different statutory regime, like it does mean amending the Children Act, and it does mean having a broader conversation about, do we wish to change the way we deal with children? Do we want to redefine the age beneath 16? These are very complicated issues we need to carefully consider.
Thanks, Minister. Thanks for your acknowledgement also of the work the Garda are doing in Dunleary and Blackrock, and I was delighted to welcome you to Blackrock when you did visit there. I appreciate your attention to the issue. I also acknowledge what you said about the progressiveness of the Children Act. That's important. But what people are saying to me on the ground, and as I say, if you're relying on Oberstown or incarceration for children, the system has already failed at that stage. There are people locally who tell me that there are young children who will say to them when they're confronted about their criminal behaviour that they can't be touched, they can't be arrested, they can't face the consequences that would apply to an adult. The younger they are, the more they believe that. And as long as they believe that, they will continue to act with impunity. They will continue to disrupt the lives of lawful and law-abiding citizens in our communities. It may be that a legislative response is required, but I do think we should be talking about having a conversation about this and asking ourselves what it is we need to do to ensure that there is some kind of an arrest to the antisocial behaviour that is creating victims in our local community. And as I say, the spectrum of activity ranges from bad behaviour, shouting, whatever might be in a local area, to much more serious things like property damage to businesses, like theft, like robbery and assault and more serious matters. Now, if for the only reason that we want to protect those children from the consequences of getting on a slippery slope to more serious criminality as adults, It is incumbent on us as a legislature, as a state, for your department, for Garda Síochána, to put a stop to this and make sure the message gets out to those kids that if they're going to behave antisocially and criminally, there will be consequences. They will suffer them. And I recognise what you've said about the juvenile liaison system. It has yielded results, no doubt about that. Maybe it needs more resources, maybe we need to make it more effective or more commonly used or whatever it is, but there cannot be a message to young people, or children in particular, that they can behave with impunity, because they can't.
Obviously, the youth diversion programme does not mean that children cannot be arrested, cannot be convicted of offences, cannot be apprehended by the Gardaí. If the Gardaí come across youths who are involved in criminal behaviour or breaches of public order, they can apply the law in respect of them, and it may be necessary at times for them to be arrested. Now, you're right, that does result in further bureaucracy within a Garda station, because arresting a child is treated differently to arresting an adult. But it still can be done, and I just want to assure the general public and that the Gardaí can arrest juveniles who are involved in the commission of criminal behaviour. That doesn't mean that subsequently, after they're arrested, that once they go through the process, that they can't then be put on the pathway of the youth diversion programme. You will know yourself, Deputy, that generally criminal behaviour is committed by predominantly boys and men between the ages of, say, 14, and once they get to around the age of 30, they cop on and they stop committing criminal behaviour. But you're absolutely right. We are doing a disservice to people between the ages of 14 and 18 if we don't try and stop them or divert them. Because if you're committing criminal behaviour on the last day of your 17th year, once you become 18, you're inevitably going to end up in the adult system and probably incarcerated. I should have mentioned, I do recall being witch out in Dún Laoghaire. I was impressed by what is going out there, but policing obviously of youths is complicated. I want to try to ensure there's greater resources for the Gardaí, but also, like, if there's an opportunity, if youths are hanging around, and sometimes happens more in the summer months, we need to ensure that we have the services as well, so they can do things, play football, get involved in sport, and divert them from the criminal behaviour. But if they're involved in criminal behaviour, the law should come down on them relatively hard, because if it doesn't, we're doing them a disservice.
Thank you, Minister.